Dr. Sonia Morrow unlocked the final metal cabinet in Lab 9, her heart thrumming with a mixture of pride and dread. Over the past year, she and her team had spearheaded a global initiative to genetically enhance microbes capable of devouring plastic, oil, and other pollutants. They intended their breakthroughs as a way to reverse the lingering environmental devastation evident in every polluted coastline and smog-choked city. But the lab now felt more like a crypt than a bastion of hope. With the lights flickering overhead, she gingerly pulled a sealed canister from its slot. Inside, a milky fluid containing trillions of engineered microbes sloshed ominously. This canister was labeled as the last strain MAR9, short for Marine Adaptive Recycler Batch 9. It was the pinnacle of her life's work, and the reason for her every nightmare. She remembered how the entire program was funded, grants from multinational conglomerates eager to redeem their reputations. The public hailed the pilot studies in aquatic cleanup zones as resounding successes. These new microbes could consume plastic trash and transform it into harmless byproducts in record time. They broke down crude oil spills, leaving behind waters that were cleaner than before. Everyone cheered. The news ran stories of nature's new heroes, featuring close-ups of murky water turned pristine in days. Memorial statues went up in some port cities, lauding the scientists who had made it happen. At galas and conferences, Dr. Morrow was praised as the world's savior. Behind the scenes, however, Dr. Morrow wrestled with qualms. MAR9 wasn't a single type of microbe. It was a combination of carefully merged species, each engineered with specialized enzymes to break down different kinds of synthetic materials. The genetic tapestry was complex. It opened as many doors to mutation as it supposedly closed. Early on, she and her colleague, Dr. Daniel Zhu, had discovered that MAR9 had an unexpected capacity to adapt at alarming speed. A sample that had been introduced to a new polymer in the lab would, by the next day, have discovered a novel enzymatic pathway to break it down. Although that was precisely why the corporations had funded the research, it also meant the microbe's boundaries for potential interactions were vast. Lab protocols mandated the use of high-level containment suits, sealed environments, and an elaborate cascade of kill-swift chemicals in case any strain threatened to escape its bounds. Over time, government regulations loosened. Politicians hungry for headlines celebrated the immediate drops in pollution levels, calling this new biotech the key to preserving Earth for our children. Additional projects sprang up elsewhere, often with far less rigorous oversight. At the same time, Dr. Morrow noticed strains of MAR microbes spreading into local water treatment plants, possibly due to cross-contamination or sabotage. She tried to raise concerns, penning urgent letters to colleagues and drafting memos for the Ministry of Environmental Safety, but her messages were drowned out by applause from global news networks. Nobody wanted to believe the very cure that had proven so extraordinary might also be the seed of an unimaginable threat. Dr. Zhu, normally the quiet pragmatist, became increasingly uneasy about the direction of the research. Late one night, he cornered Dr. Morrow in the hallway, away from the cameras that had come to chronicle their work. "Sonia," he murmured, his eyes shadowed with fatigue, "we've created something we can't fully control. If these microbes have begun to deviate from their engineered constraints, no environment will remain safe." He showed her data from a remote station in the Pacific Ocean, where microbial growth had spiked unexpectedly around shipping lanes. "All the plastic in the sea," he said, "and they've consumed it. But the byproducts they're leaving behind, they're not supposed to exist." She pored over the data. The microbes had begun synthesizing macromolecules that resembled the proteins found in living organisms, not inert plastic or metal. Through some evolutionary quirk, they were bridging an unthinkable gap, forging organic matter out of inorganic waste. Dr. Morrow felt her stomach lurch. She knew that in nature, certain microscopic life forms could exchange genetic material among themselves. Yet seeing the evidence that her precision-engineered microbes were transmuting plastic into something that could become part of the food chain was terrifying. She could barely sleep that night, tormented by dread that they hadn't just purified pollution, but opened a door for these microbes to feed and transform matter on a far broader scale. Then came the day the lab discovered fragments of living tissue riddled with the MAR microbe in some aquatic samples near a recycling port. Official channels denied it at first, chalking it up to forgeries or lab contamination. But Dr. Shu's revised tests proved otherwise. The microbe was infecting organic cells, gradually rewriting them. Its original design was to consume harmful pollutants, but in an environment laden with diverse materials, it had found ways to degrade more than just plastic. Through unnatural mutations, it had developed the capacity to break down human flesh. Her carefully assembled microbe was no longer just living pollution. It had become a consumer of life. The public remained oblivious until an outbreak ravaged a coastal fishing village. Initially reported as a flesh-eating bacteria infection, rumors circulated about entire families disappearing overnight. By the time health officials arrived, the cause of the outbreak had vanished into the water, yet behavior gleaned from survivors' testimonies underscored a horrifying truth. The microbe attacked any exposed flesh while leaving other surfaces untouched. People developed lesions that ate through limbs in hours. The local environment was ravaged, with the microbe repropagating in the ocean, traveling between fish, birds, and unfortunate humans who relied on that fishing ground. It wasn't a simple bacteria anymore. It was a monstrous entity that devoured anything it deemed a viable food source. As global agencies scrambled to contain the crisis, Dr. Morrow found herself at the heart of a storm. She was thrust in front of cameras, anchored under scorn and threats. The public demanded answers, and her employers tried to spin the narrative. It was an act of bioterror, they said, or the result of sabotage from rogue labs. Yet the shocking reality gradually dawned. The world had tampered with nature on a deeply fundamental level, unleashing a plague with no natural predator. The microbe had the capacity to reproduce and spread faster than any virus known to humankind. And it was everywhere. Water pipes, rivers, lakes, and even the condensation in the air around industrial centers became a vehicle for its distribution. A few weeks after the fishing village outbreak, Dr. Shu vanished. He'd told Dr. Morrow that something felt off in the labs. Some canisters of MAR-9 were missing, including older prototypes. Then, in the hush of night, a lab assistant discovered Dr. Morrow's protective gear tampered with. Someone had attempted to sabotage her. She feared infiltration by a corporate stakeholder hoping to cover their tracks, or perhaps even radical eco-activists, believing that unleashing the microbe was the only way to eradicate humanity's polluting presence. The danger was coming from all sides. She no longer knew who to trust. Without Dr. Shu's partnership, Dr. Morrow toiled alone in empty offices and restricted containment chambers, trying to find a solution. If the microbe had mutated, perhaps it could be unmutated or starved of some essential nutrient. She hammered out proposals for an inhibitor, a chemical compound that could block the rogue enzymes, effectively rendering the microbe unable to break down organic material. But her pleas for test subjects and funding were met with silence. Governments were busy controlling escalations. Other towns reported bizarre flesh infections. Some desperate officials even resorted to bombing entire regions to prevent further spread, destroying property and forcibly evacuating unwilling residents. Then came total blackouts of information as the communications infrastructure fractured under the strain of panic. In that vacuum, rumors spiraled. Word spread of mutants, of creatures that had once been canines, though their bodies now crawled with strange protuberances of microbial-laden tissue. People whispered about men who had stumbled out of infected waters with half their faces rotted away, still shambling forward, delirious, seeking aid until they collapsed. Dr. Morrow's face was plastered on digital wanted posters, with some calling for her to stand trial for crimes against humanity. The infrastructure of modern civilization began to fall apart. Fresher food supplies dwindled due to contamination fears. Water treatment plants became epicenters of infection. Humanity's network of commerce and communication quickly unraveled under siege, from a threat too microscopic to see with the naked eye, yet vicious enough to outmaneuver entire armies. Driven underground, Dr. Morrow found refuge within an old laboratory facility in a mountainous region far from major cities. It had been a government storage bunker years ago, later abandoned and then purchased for a pittance by wealthy biotech investors. Using leftover equipment in the facility's subterranean labs, she tried to refine her inhibitor formula. With luck, she hoped to craft a self-replicating bacteriophage that would specifically target the flesh-eating microbe. It was an idea as dangerous as the original project, but she saw no other option. She practically lived in the lab, pumping chemicals through tubes, swirling vials in makeshift reactors, and analyzing results on battered monitors. She lost track of day and night. Her body wasted away from stress and low rations. The shrieks of wildlife infected by the microbe sometimes reverberated outside the fortress walls. One evening, while scanning tissue samples from a farm animal that had wandered near the bunker, she realized with horror that the microbe's rate of mutation had skyrocketed again. Her prior analysis had been outpaced by nature's twisted ingenuity. It now displayed membrane-bound organelles that were reminiscent of advanced eukaryotic cells, an impossible leap in complexity for a microbe originally designed to remain simplistic. Dr. Merrill snapped at him with a frown. That meant it was likely evolving into a multifaceted threat, adopting more advanced cellular machinery that rendered it even harder to kill. The new strain needed more complex organic compounds for survival. Human tissue suddenly became a prime target. The following morning, Dr. Moreau ventured into the bunker's corridor, her breath ragged. She had to check the air treatment systems to ensure no infiltration had occurred. The corridor was lit by a single flickering overhead lamp when she spotted footprints. They were wet, trailing dark fluid across the concrete floor. Someone had broken into the facility. She ducked behind a large generator and squinted, her heart pounding. She waited silent for an intruder to pass. Dr. Zhu emerged around a distant corner, shoulders slumped, his lab coat in tatters. He looked thinner and older, as if he had aged a decade in a matter of weeks. His hair was streaked with dried blood. She wanted to shout for joy at seeing him alive, but held back, noticing the small lumps under his skin that pulsed with unnatural vigor. She crept forward, and he turned to face her. "Sonia," he whispered, voice raspy. "I'm sorry." He stumbled, pressing a hand against the wall, leaving a smear that looked black under the dim light. She wanted to rush to him, but her instincts screamed caution. He was infected. She could see his eyes flicker with something more primal. The lump squirmed just under his skin, as if the microbe was embedded in his tissues, reshaping him from within. She considered running, but something in his eyes pleaded for her presence. "I've tried," his words were barely audible, "to stop it, but it took me. Please, finish the inhibitor." Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed, convulsing. Dr. Morrow seized a protective mask from the equipment cart and slipped it on. She rummaged for a tranquilizer in case Dr. Xu sprang at her. But he just lay there, the lumps beneath his skin wriggling, reaching up his neck, distorting his body in horrifying waves of motion. She couldn't bring herself to flee. This was her oldest friend, the man who had helped create Mar9, and now he was the microbe's host. Carefully, she edged forward. "Daniel," she said, voice muffled through her mask. "I'll try." She cut herself off. His eyes were open but no longer human. A low guttural sound, a sound she'd never heard from a person before, echoed through the hall. He spasmed, then jerked his head violently toward her, as if possessed by a predator's instinct. In a flash, he lunged, and she barely managed to dart out of the way. Before he could scramble to attack again, a trembling overcame him. He collapsed into a heap on the cold floor, thick droplets of black fluid running from his mouth, nose, and ears. Dr. Morrow watched as his body went limp, the lumps under his skin ceasing their movement. A wave of guilt crashed over her, but there was no time for mourning. With trembling hands, she retrieved a sample kit from a container on the wall, hoping that something in Dr. Zay's mutated tissues could aid her final attempt at an antidote. This was the most harrowing sample collection she had ever performed, but it could yield the crucial insight: evidence of advanced adaptation in a human host. For days, She tested the sample in the sealed environment of the subterranean lab. The swirling of fluid in test tubes, the hiss and thrum of the power generator, and the hum of the overhead fans were her only companions. She documented every new finding. This variant of the microbe had integrated pieces of Dr. Sue's DNA into its own, forming a horrifying hybrid. She tried dozens of chemical cocktails, each iteration a frantic attempt to disrupt the microbe's life cycle. The results repeatedly fell short. A new generation would flourish, mocking her attempts at control. Outside, anarchy reigned. Frantic radio transmissions crackled on the facility's emergency frequency. Humanity's strongholds fractured under waves of infection. Disease spread unimpeded in the chaos of failing infrastructure. And in Dr. Morrow's own hideout, the walls thrummed with a haunting hush that made the sound of her beakers clinking in the lab all the more ominous. No one was coming to help. As the days stretched on, she tested one last formula, a radical step that integrated experimental compounds from her earliest days in biotech research, chemical bonds that targeted the microbe's ability to replicate. She carefully introduced it to a sample of Dr. Shu's infected flesh, monitoring results in real time. For a moment, the microbe seemed to slow down. She watched the indicator lights flicker, measuring a tangible drop in metabolic activity. Her breath caught in her throat. Had she found the key? Elation seized her, but it was short-lived. The microbes, soon after being suppressed, began to morph yet again, weaving around the new chemical constraints. The fleeting success gave way to despair. This adversary was too fluid in its evolution. She stared at her raw, calloused hands and realized that genuine containment or eradication might be impossible. Unless she undertook an approach so extreme it dwarfed the microbe's adaptability. In the bunker's archives, she recalled reading about the existence of a scorched earth failsafe stored in a locked vault, a prototype bomb meant to neutralize any biologically contaminated site by unleashing a toxic combination of high heat and specialized chemical agents that could break down almost any form of organic matter. The original design was to combat spore-based bioweapons, but it might serve to cleanse the microbe if triggered at the largest infection zones. In a trembling daze, Dr. Morrow weighed the moral implications. She'd effectively be authorizing mass destruction on a scale that would kill anyone and anything in the region. The microbe's unstoppable developments had driven her to the edge of madness. For a moment, she retreated to the bunker's observation deck, where a sealed window looked out upon a gray, lifeless landscape. Trees drooped, stripped of leaves. Corpses of animals dotted the horizon, partially devoured, lumps of black fluid clinging to bones. Clouds roiled overhead in sickly shades. She wept silently, recalling a world once vibrant. She realized the microbe had not only destroyed flesh, it had stripped away nature's unity, leaving behind a twisted mockery of life. Her tears fell on the glass. She found clarity in that sorrow. This was bigger than her guilt, or her individual quest for redemption. Something had to be done, even if it cast her in the role of an angel of death. Reluctantly, she set her plan into motion. Over the course of a sleepless night, she scoured the bunker's layout, finding the secure vault that contained the fail-safe device. With gloved hands, she assessed the device's fragile casing. The instructions were minimal and outdated. She read them over and over until she could almost recite every line from memory. The bomb would initiate a brief nuclear-level heat pulse along with a chemical meltdown of biological matter within a wide radius, effectively disintegrating complex life. It was not meant for selective destruction. Anything with living tissue would be vaporized. Now came the question. Where was the largest infiltration point that would guarantee the microbe's annihilation? The contaminated water systems had spread it everywhere, but it concentrated most heavily near the oceans. She debated traveling to the coastal region where it all started, but the infrastructure to deliver the bomb was gone. No flights or trains were running, and the roads were rumored to be blockaded. Still, she couldn't just detonate it in the mountains. The microbe presence was real here, but not at the scale it was at sea level. In the end, there was no neat solution. Another idea took shape. If she armed the device in the bunker's underground water treatment reservoir, connected to a significant subterranean aquifer, Perhaps the subsequent shockwave would travel along channels of water, scalding and chemically purging a vast network of infection. The magnitude of destruction would be unimaginable, but so was the threat. She typed out a warning message on the emergency broadcast system, urging any survivors listening to flee. She gave them 6 hours. 6 hours for anyone who still breathed to go as far as possible from the facility. Those hours ticked by in a haze. She imagined what Dr. Shi would have said. He had once been the voice of caution, the voice of conscience, who demanded they weigh the consequences of every action. Yet the world they knew was all but gone. The microbes had triumphed. She whispered, "I'm sorry," to the memory of him, and to every nameless soul devoured by their creation. In the bunker's final hour, the overhead lights fluctuated. She hefted the heavy device, feeling the chill of its casing through her gloves. Stepping down the corridors she had walked so many times, she passed Dr. Zhu's still form, covered with a sheet out of a last gesture of respect. Her footsteps resounded in the emptiness. She reached the reservoir chamber, a cavernous space that smelled faintly of chemicals and stale water. A platform overlooked pools of water swirling with a dark, oily sheen. The microbe was there, feeding on any trace of organic matter. The smell alone was stomach-turning. She set the bomb on the platform's edge and began the arming sequence, carefully entering codes from the manual. A final set of instructions displayed on the device's small screen. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Once activated, it would offer a short countdown, not enough time to get anywhere truly safe, but maybe she could reach some outcropping of the bunker that might shield her from the initial blast. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she keyed in the final code. The light on the device turned from red to green, and a digital display began counting backward from 300 seconds. 5 minutes. She stared at the swirling water below, a universe of predators too small to see but massive in consequence. She inched away, moving as quickly as her shaking legs allowed, determined to find an insulated corner behind the thickest set of blast doors. Her vision blurred with tears as she hustled down the corridor, adrenaline surging through her exhausted limbs. She picked a storeroom whose walls were reinforced with lead plating and storage crates. Slamming the thick door behind her, she braced everything she could find against it. The countdown flashed in her mind. Less than 4 minutes now. She slumped to the floor. All her old regrets swooped in. She recalled the first glimpses of success in cleaning up beaches, the naive belief that the microbe would be humanity's savior. An ember of hope flared. Perhaps the device would remove the microbe's scourge, letting Earth heal anew. Perhaps some distant pockets of survivors would rebuild, forging a new era of humility. The alternative was unthinkable, that even her final gambit would fail. She shut her eyes, hearing the murmur of time slipping away. She wished for a chance to atone, to prevent the microbe from spreading in the first place. But that was gone now. All that remained was the unstoppable approach of the final second. A faint hum pulsed through the bunker, the device's mechanisms preparing to unleash an inferno. Her chest felt heavy, a leaden fear that dwarfed everything she had ever known. Then, in an instant, her world collapsed into a roar beyond sound and a flash beyond sight. When it ended, a sulphurous silence descended. The microbe's future was uncertain, as was hers. Yet in the wake of the devastated landscape, in pockets beyond the burn radius, seeds of life might wait beneath the soil, free from the devouring plague at last. A new day might rise, or nothing at all. If any living eyes were left to see, they might find an earth cleansed, but at a cost too horrifying to measure. And so ended the greatest of humanity's mistakes, forged from the best of intentions and sealed in the heart of an annihilating blaze.